applause together. Come on. Thank you. Just a word or two about who I am. I am on the board of Sustainable Lafayette and of an organization called SaveNature.org. I didn't cause that thunder, whatever that was. I'm volunteering for Prop 37, and I'm a retired psychologist. I've got a couple of books under my belt. One of them is called The Green Food Print. Got a couple copies here. It's a kind of a survey of all the stuff you need to know to be an earth-friendly eater. And the other one is a thriller about stopping the smuggling of endangered species. But today we're here to talk about... Oh, that's a motorcycle. Oh, okay. Today we're here to talk about genetically modified organisms. And could I just get a sense of what brings you here? Like you know a lot already, you just heard about it.
Curiosity. I wanted to know more after I read something, and I wanted to know more of what I read.
Okay. Any other? Does that kind of cover a lot of people? Kind of initial curiosity. Any activists here? Any Monsanto spies? No? Okay. Okay. So, dangers of GMOs and your right to know. That's what the proposition is really about. Your right to know what's in your food. So, let's just start from what is a GMO? You know what genes are. They're the kind of the building blocks of life that dictate your species, your features, and so forth. And scientists have in the last 20 years engineered foods in which they've tinkered with the genes for several purposes. So here's the actual definition. It's any organism, which means plant, animal, bacteria, virus, and living thing whose genetic material has been altered. And that can be done by taking genes and inserting them into other genes and then putting it into the plant or animal. It's a new set of genes. And the idea is we can improve on nature. Human beings, of course, have been crossbreeding animals and plants for thousands and thousands of years. That's why we had dogs of all different shapes and sizes, little teacups and, giant Great Danes. And that's why we have corn that is so beautiful. Have you ever seen the original species of corn? I forget the name of it. It's about this big. Teosinte? Is that right? Anyway, little tiny kernels. And now we have these beautiful large corns. So hybridization and selective breeding is kind of a natural thing that we've been doing. Genetic engineering is totally different. You put genes from one species into another species, like anchovies into oranges. They make glow-in-the-dark puppies. They're things that are totally not natural. By the way, I've just been learning about GMOs in the last month or two, especially this week, getting ready for today. So you might have some questions I can't answer, but I'll do my best to kind of explain why Prop 37 is so important. Okay, 90% of the corn in this country has been genetically modified. Soy is almost as the market has been penetrated to that extent. Sugar beets and animals, they've got genetically modified salmon now. And the sad thing is, genetic modification of foods does not have to be tested in order to be released onto the market. Any tests that are done by the companies that made the seeds or the organism, and they're submitted to the FDA that goes, oh, that's interesting, stamp. Yes?
Are there any side effects that modifications?
That is a very important question. It's still being studied. There were no human studies done on genetically modified food. So that's why they can say it's harmless, because there's no proof that it's harmful. I don't know about you, I'm old enough to remember when thalidomide came out and there were children born without limbs, and somebody had said, you know, this is all okay. There's one doctor at the FDA, or the FDA, Francis Kelsey, anyway, one doctor stopped it from being flooded in this country. You remember that? So our regulators, FDA, USDA, EPA, basically have been bullied, co-opted. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a little while, but we do not have the protection that we think we have from our government. So what are they for? Why did anybody bother to spend all this money to invent these things? So according to the World Health Organization, the crops, that is the plants, resistant to insects, resistant to viruses, and to be able to tolerate herbicides. Now, I'll mostly be talking about number 3, although I can briefly say that some corn has been engineered so that it creates its own pesticide inside the corn that we eat, so that if a bug eats it, it drops dead. I don't know about you, I would rather eat a bug than yes? All right. Bug eaters unite. So here's what the proponents of GMO say, and they have friends in the media, let me tell you, that will spout their line. GMO will feed the world. GMO will prevent disease because you can put vitamin A into rice. Oh, by the way, you'd have to eat like 10 pounds of rice a day to get enough to stop the eye disease that it's supposed to prevent. And it's supposed to reduce pesticide use. And you'll see that that third one is so much of a joke, it's hard to believe. The idea was that you would, let's take corn, you would genetically engineer the corn plant so that it would not curl up and die when you sprayed it with a lot of pesticides. So you could spray it with pesticides, really intense dosages, and the corn plant would survive. Well, then you wouldn't have to keep spraying all summer. And we know that that is bad because pesticides, only about 1% of the pesticide reaches a pest. Most of it goes into the soil, the water, or the plant. And the water meaning runoff from the rain. It goes into creeks and ultimately to the river. I'll show you a picture in a minute that will amaze you. Oh, by the way, they're safe. This is what we are to believe. Now, the health risks, as I said, they're just starting, or maybe they haven't even started human trials. I was just speaking to Michael Greger, who's in the next room and who works for the Humane Society on these issues. There are no human studies done. Well, that itself should tell us something. These have not been tested. But some suspected links are allergies, organ damage, reproductive effects. It's hard to tell because we're flooding our environment with so many poisons that which one is causing which and which interaction. There are thousands of chemicals in our environment and very few have been tested. And the combinations, Okay, did you see about this week a study came out from France? You heard about the French study? It really was very amazing. These scientists took a bunch of rats, whose lifespan, by the way, is about 2 or 3 years. And they studied them for 2+ years, so throughout most of their lifespan. Industry tests are usually like 90 days, and they'll say, hey, 90 days, no damage, we're all okay. So these scientists studied them for several years, and they found mammary tumors, pituitary in the males, liver congestion. Necrosis means the cells are dying. And kidneys, palpable means you can just literally feel them, tumors, and chronic kidney deficiencies. And brace yourself. Can you see the pictures of these tumors? This is a tumor on a rat that was fed GMO corn, and I don't know about you, but that scares me. You know that the breast cancer rate in this country has been rising till 1 in 8 women will, there's some of us in this room, we've got more than 8 here, might be at risk. So the study said that wait a sec, health hazards. I beg your pardon, I'm sorry. I've got a bunch of, okay, here it is. Here's that there was a control group, and the rats that lived on this GMO corn had 2 to 3 times more large tumors, 50% of males and 70% of females died prematurely, compared to 30 and 20% in the control groups. So other studies have been done. They're animal studies, and if anybody's interested, I can make this available to you. It's a long list of animal studies from around the world. So all in all, I don't know the science as to how the gene might create an illness, but the pesticides that the genetic modified organisms permit, that is easier to trace. Pesticides exist to kill living things. And you may know that the pesticide manufacturers, that these are the products that in World War II were biological weapons. Then unavoidably came peace, and the manufacturers go, gee, what are we going to do with all our weapons? Well, let's see, what can we turn them into? And they turned them into pesticides. So this is really bioterror that we're talking about. I think you had a question?
I was just wondering that you said the mice without the corn were more healthy and lived longer.
Yeah.
Is that all of them, or just?
It said, I think they lived 50% of males and 70% of females in the experimental group died prematurely.
Yeah, but the ones that
Compared to 30% and 20% respectively in the control group. Now, I don't know whether, like, that's the normal bell curve, like you're going to have 20% of anything die sooner than the majority.
It just sounds like the ones without the corn were healthier than the ones with the corn.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah, these are the ones that had the GMO corn. So, are the health risks proven? Well, the people who stand to profit from it say, no, they're not proven. Well, that's right. No human tests have been done. But other countries aren't taking a chance. I searched and searched and tried to find a complete list of the countries. The number most usually stated is 50 countries around the world have full or partial bans, and that either they banned them or they required to be labeled. or, for example, some parts of, like New South Wales in Australia has regulations, but the rest of Australia doesn't. So at any rate, a lot of Europe is requiring labeling. And so the American countries have to put labels on the stuff that they are trying to sell in Europe. Yes?
Doesn't the UK have a ban, or they don't have a ban?
I don't know. Sorry. I think so, but I didn't want to say it unless I had tracked it down this week, which I didn't. Okay, FDA doesn't require safety testing, but other groups have said we should be doing it. The World Health Organization and the American Medical Association, and these are not fringe groups, I hardly need to say. I mean, the American Medical Association is certainly conservative and very friendly with the pharmaceutical industry. Now, remember when I said they claim that pesticide use goes down? Briefly, it did for a few years, and a guy named Charles Benbrook, has just a few months ago published a study showing that pesticide use has gone up. Substantial increases in the number and volume of herbicides applied. And the reason, I can tell you in one word: evolution. So you know this, right? The bugs have evolved. You know, when Bush was president, they were trying to explain this to him, and I really wondered how you would explain bug evolution to a, fundamentalist. But there's just no doubt about it. They're getting, the bugs just go, ha ha, I'm still here. And so what we've come up with is what they call super weeds. So now the farmers go, well, I guess I have to put on more pesticides. Now they're starting, even Roundup is not strong enough anymore, and that is Monsanto's big moneymaker. So they're using 2,4-D, which is an older chemical that Roundup was supposed to be less toxic than. You might remember 2,4-D starring in such episodes of American history as the Vietnam War. It's a component of Agent Orange. Now they're trying to get corn approved that can withstand Agent Orange, this component of it. So I have some more numbers here on the increase in pesticides. This study, he found that GMO technology drove up herbicide use by 527 million pounds, or about 11% between 1996 and 2011. So 1996 was when Roundup Ready, that is the crops that were able to withstand Roundup, hit the fields. It's been actually 16 years. I didn't realize until this last month or two that we've had this going on for 16 years. Weeds started to develop resistance. By 2011, farms using Roundup Ready seeds were using 24% more herbicide than non-GMO farms planting the same crops. So if you hear any advertisements against Prop 37 that say GMO helps us reduce pesticide use, it is an out-and-out flat lie. Also, to sum it up, his study, GMOs have added more than 4 pounds of herbicides to U.S. farm fields for every pound of insecticide they've taken away. So, I think we can agree that there's an issue here. Actually, I do know that pesticides have been linked specifically with Parkinson's disease. That particular disease and that particular chemical link has more scientific support than some of the others. But again, I'm not that kind of a scientist, so I can't swear to that, but I'm pretty sure that that's somewhat accepted now. Okay, now here is somebody at Pesticide Action Network. This is a nonprofit based in San Francisco that has been working on this issue for 20 or 30 years. These people know their business, and they're made of scientists. Okay, the study that I just mentioned shatters one of industry's long-standing myths. GMOs have driven up overall pesticide use, including 400, well actually he said 537 million more pounds. Oh yes, that's 537, take away the, anyway. The increase in pesticide use is expected to continue unless we do something about it. 24 types of weeds are now resistant to glyphosate. So glyphosate is a word you might hear in the month ahead of us. Superweeds become increasingly resistant, and farmers use greater quantities of the product. This, by the way, this evolution issue has been around for many years, way before GMO. It's called the pesticide treadmill. If you're a farmer and you start using pesticides, the bugs will evolve, so then you'll use more, then they'll evolve some more, and every year you are on this treadmill of buying more pesticides. I'm going to stop here. Yes, question.
It's sort of, the more you use, the more they change. What if you stop?
What if you stopped using pesticides? Gosh, the only example I can think of is an anecdote about a farm that stopped using it and immediately their productivity went up. But again, maybe Pesticide Action Network would be the place to go. And the website is PANNA for North America, PANNA.org. So they would know the science. Any other questions or comments? How are you all feeling about hearing all this?
It makes me nervous.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Last night I was at the Roxy Cinema, and there's a movie, a documentary on there now called Pesticides.
Yes.
And it's about the GMOs in India and how, economically, how, when the bugs, the plants develop superbugs, there's this vicious cycle, they don't have the money, they have to go to the money lender, and a lot of them lose their farms as a result because they cannot repay because they lose the crop, and so they end up committing suicide. But this Monsanto, the whole cycle, it's laid out for you, and I recommend everybody go see it. It's at the Roxy.
It's called the Bitter Seeds. Yeah. I think the figure that I've heard is 125,000 suicides from farmers in India who've lost everything because they believed GMO cotton. I think cotton was the main one.
Yes. They were tricked into believing that their conventional seeds wouldn't be as effective. They wouldn't yield as good a harvest as if they used the Monsanto seeds. And so they switched to the Monsanto seeds, and that didn't happen. They had to then buy pesticides, which they never had to before. Then they had to have the manpower, and then they had weeds, and then their family, in jeopardy, and then they end up committing suicide. But it's good, I'll stop in a minute, it's good on many levels, it also addresses the issue of women in society. Especially
The movie is good, you mean?
The documentary.
Yes.
Yes. And so there are many levels, but this is, the focus of it. But I recommend people see it.
Yeah. It's the whole spectacle of what the chemical and biotech industries have done. In 100 years, they won't believe this was allowed.
Yeah.
if we're still here. Okay. Well, as I've mentioned, and Chuck Benbrook has proved, there is more pesticides out there, contrary to their claims. Here is a picture. Does anybody recognize what this is? It's a dead zone. Here's Louisiana. So the Mississippi River is coming down here. The Mississippi River, Missouri-Mississippi, drains at least a third of the United States and at least, let's say, half the crop growing territory of the United States. So anything upriver, which is thousands of miles, what have you got? Farms using pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, hormones to feed the animals because they're so jammed together that they give them hormones to make them grow more rapidly, and antibiotics because they're so crammed together they would all die of plague if they weren't given antibiotics to keep them alive long enough to kill. So every growing season, all these pesticides run off, go down the rivers, and this is the part of the Gulf of Mexico that has been so contaminated by farm runoff and industrial pollutants. Remember, there are lots of factories up here too. And lawns. People who put all this stuff on their lawns. So people with lawns like us are contributing to it. So this area of the Gulf is so poisoned that nothing can live there. No fish, this is called a dead zone. And there are dead zones all around the world, hundreds of them. This is hundreds of square miles of water that have been killed, partly by these chemicals. Okay, so another thing that happens, oh yes?
So that's a dead zone. Where does that separate the land from the Gulf of Mexico then?
Oh, on the map?
Yeah. I would guess it was that.
So here's the boundary.
Okay, so the Gulf of Mexico.
And so this is really poisoned, and this is...
That brown below the green line?
This is the dead zone, and this gives you an idea of the intensity of how contaminated. So closest to shore is most contaminated.
What's scary is that the South is well known for seafood, shrimp and crayfish, and just don't know how much of that has been spread.
Yes, and that's even before the oil hemorrhage of a couple of years ago. So environmental risks, I'm just going to mention a couple of them. One is that if you have GMO crops growing over here, the pollen can drift, and if you're an organic farmer over here and this pollen drifts onto your property, you can't sell it as organic anymore, and on top of it, Monsanto will sue you, which they've done. They will sue you for stealing something you didn't want. Yes?
There's got to be some kind of legal restriction against the corporation creating a scenario in which it's much more convenient for them to sue someone for doing something that's against their will in the first place, because the notion of suing someone, in theory, should be based on someone doing something intentionally. With you can prove malice aforethought by the defendant, the would-be defendant, against the plaintiff, who's the one who sues the defendant. The defendant is allegedly doing something that he or she intended to do that was knowingly against the plaintiff's interests. And the plaintiff is instead creating a scenario where the defendant
becomes the villain.
Being accused of doing something they're the victim of in the first place. The defendant should be suing the plaintiff. It should be the other way around.
That's right, yes.
Maybe I can shed a little light on this. I think, I'm a patent attorney, I think Monsanto is suing these people who are using their pollen, which is now Roundup Ready, for patent infringement.
Yeah.
I think that's how they're getting these people and claiming that they're doing something wrong. They shouldn't be suing them for that, but I think that's how they're
Right.
managing
Did everybody hear? Because genetically modified organisms, that is living things, can be patented. In fact, we can thank Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who I think, am I correct, wrote the decision allowing living things to be patented. So Monsanto will say, well, we don't care how it got to your property. You now have our property. So you have our patented goods.
I think part of that, the reason for that is Clarence Thomas also served as counsel for Monsanto in the past.
Yes, I have a list of people who have worked for Monsanto that will make you shake in your boots if you're not already. Okay, but remember there's good news at the end, okay? So wild animal species, if they escape from their farmed nets, which they have been doing, interbreed with wild salmon, then there goes your pure wild salmon. Loss of biodiversity, I think the monarch butterflies are the ones that have been most clearly shown to suffer from GMO corn and GMO plantings. And biodiversity, I mean, did you know that 75% of the calories consumed by humans all over the globe, some brave soul figured this out, obviously it's an educated estimate, 75% of the calories humans eat come from 7 crops: corn, wheat, rice, potatoes, cassava, sorghum, and barley. And there are hundreds of edible food species. So we're planting these thousands of acres of one variety of one crop, like thousands of acres of one kind of corn. And that means that if a few bugs do get in, they have a whole banquet awaiting them, whereas small organic mixed farms, the bug can only find a little patch to grow in. So that's another reason that pesticide use has gone up. So anyway, eating more diverse foods is a really good thing that you can be doing. Just try things you've never tried before. So what does Proposition 37 do? What have you guys heard that Prop 37 does from either one side or the other? Yes?
It requires labeling so everybody knows. But I also heard in a commercial, which I wanted to ask you about since you actually got to the proposition, and this is a commercial to vote against it. It's not a good argument, I don't think. But in the commercial, there's a guy from Stanford, and they play this commercial every day. And he's saying that there's a lot of groups that are exempt from labeling, like meat and dairy does not have to be labeled. And I wanted to ask you why those groups are exempt. Is it just because they couldn't even get this proposition on the ballot without giving them the big ag?
That I don't know. There are some exemptions, and I know the other guys are arguing that's politically motivated. So I don't know enough, sorry. I do know that this guy supposedly from Stanford is not on the faculty at Stanford. No. He is that what you've? He is on a member of Brookings Institute, which is a conservative think tank.
I thought they were more of a sort of progressive think tank.
No, that's good. Could I?
Did I say Brookings?
You said Brookings.
Sorry.
Hoover?
I think it's Hoover.
Yeah,
Hoover is the other one. Okay. But that's an example of the advertising that you're going to hear. Okay, so what does Proposition 37 do? And the whole thing is pages and pages long. I kind of read as much as I could, but obviously not enough to answer your question. There are some exemptions. Essentially, it boils down to this. Commencing July 1st, 2014, any food offered for retail sale in California is misbranded if it is, or may have been, entirely or partially produced with genetic engineering, and that fact is not disclosed. So, label it. So if anybody or any advertisement says, oh, all these foods are going to be taken off the shelves, that is not true. You can buy that if you want it. They can sell it if they can find buyers. They just have to label it. Now, again, I'm old enough to remember the fights when the initial food labeling laws were proposed 30 and 40 years ago. Oh, the manufacturers had a tizzy. Oh, we can't give away our proprietary secrets. The sky will fall. Well, now food is labeled for things like sodium, fats, even trans fats, which was the scandal about 5 years ago.
And beyond that, beyond the ingredient lists and nutrition labels or supplement facts or whatever, now they require, it's become ubiquitous to see a disclaimer that this product was produced in a factory that also processes tree nuts, peanuts, dairy, wheat, eggs, and so forth, in case anyone's allergic to it, because it might be technically vegan in terms of the ingredients, but at the same time might have also touched the molecules of some of these allergenic substances that could cause some really horrific reactions in some certain people, like anaphylactic shock.
Yeah, that can be fatal. So that's what Prop 37 says. You had a question?
What I saw in the ads, one of the ads, and they played regularly, is that I don't understand, is labeling, and you'll have to label the meat and dog food as whether it's GMO or not, but you're not required to label the meat for human consumption as GMO or not, and that I don't know.
I can't explain how the government does its thing. That's one of the things, that's why Prop 37 was initiated, because government wasn't doing the job. That this is a citizens' initiative. We have to protect ourselves. So, okay, I checked up Monsanto's revenue last year, fiscal year 2011, 11.8 billion, and in another source I found that about 50% of that comes from GMO seeds and Roundup and their pesticide line. So let's say $6 billion is what Monsanto is defending. So for them, they've put in at least $7 million to run these TV ads this month. So that's peanuts for them. That what they're protecting is their $6 billion and other industries. Well, we're all here because we believe these are just as important or more important. Our health, our environment, and our democracy. I like the way that Prop 37 has been framed as a right to know. It's not banning it because, as we know, the science isn't in on how damaging it is directly to human health or so let's just make our own decisions. Historically, these are things that big businesses have done for 150 years. And they haven't stopped now. There's a great book called Trust Us, We're Experts. That
by Matt Stabler and John Rampton.
Yeah.
Same people who wrote Toxic Sludge is Good for You.
Yeah, Toxic Sludge is Good for You. Thank you. PR, that should be on here. PR, public relations. In other words, persuading you that their position is right, even if it's lies. Lobbying, campaign contributions, revolving door. Revolving door means when big business offers a very lucrative job to somebody that is in or was in or will be in a regulatory agency. And lawsuits we've mentioned. Okay, here are, now this may be too small for you to read. Here are some of the people that are supposed to be protecting us in the FDA, USDA, and EPA. And, okay, Michael Friedman, acting commissioner of the FDA. He was the senior vice president for a drug company that has been purchased by Monsanto. Okay, well, maybe he can keep his, two areas of interest separate. What about Arthur Hull Hayes? He used to be an FDA commissioner and a consultant to the PR firm for Searle, this biochem company. Then there's Margaret Miller, top Monsanto scientist, and she oversaw the approval of, this means recombinant bovine growth hormone. This is a substance that makes cows grow faster. And so she helped get that through. Deputy Director of FDA, do you feel protected yet?
Quite the contrary.
Suzanne Sechen, she also worked on our BGH. She reviews scientific data for the FDA. Michael Taylor, attorney for Monsanto, former FDA Deputy Commissioner for Policy and senior advisor to the FDA Commissioner.
You mean this guy's making the policy right now? This guy's making the policy at the FDA?
Some of these are former and some of these are current, to my knowledge. Michael Taylor, former Deputy Commissioner for Policy and senior advisor, attorney for Monsanto. I trained as a psychologist. I'm a retired psychologist, so I can tell you a little bit about what goes on in human minds when you've got conflicting information. And let me just propose a scenario. Okay, I'm Margaret Miller, right? I think I'm a good person. I don't want to, most people don't admit that they're doing bad things. That would make them a bad person, so they don't want that to be true. So if facts are presented to you that conflict with your self-image, guess what changes? The facts. It's harder to give up your self-image. Or some other fact like, well, my group is a good group. Well, those other people, well, their facts are wrong. So I'm not saying that these people, set out to poison the world. But little by little, if you get caught up in something, you can find yourself making the facts convenient. Or as Tolstoy said once, I have inclinations. I have a philosophy at the service of my inclinations. Okay, let's look at Clarence Thomas. Well, he's on the Supreme Court. He was on their staff at Monsanto. Ann Veneman, head of USDA. Board of Directors of a Monsanto subsidiary. Virginia Weldon, retired senior VP for public policy. Previously member of FDA's Metabolism and Endocrine Advisory Committee. Linda Fisher, VP for Public and Government Affairs. I bet she got paid well. Deputy Administrator of FDA.
Or EPA.
I'm sorry, EPA. And so on. This is not the complete list. So our regulatory agencies are no longer able to do what they're supposed to do. If you've heard of Marion Nestle, she's a very famous nutritionist. She wrote a book called Food Politics, which goes into great detail about how this happens. She's also written Safe Food for Your Pets, other things. The thing I most remember about one of her books is she said, my first day on the job at the USDA, my boss told me, you may not use the words eat less. Not allowed. You can't say eat less meat, for example. You can't say eat less this, that, or the other. You can say You could say make red meat a part of a balanced diet. So she's not in government anymore, yes.
So if she had identified specific, basically like life and death reasons not to consume something in general, then she wasn't allowed to tell people that was something they should seriously consider before putting it in their body.
Apparently.
Like there was no informed consent allowed by law.
Right. Not so much by law as by influence like this, because a lot of this, there are laws that say one thing, but try to get them implemented. You've probably all heard Howard Lyman speak. Is that fair to say?
Many times. It's wonderful.
And he describes how long it took to get the USDA organic standard implemented. Correct me if I'm wrong. The law was passed in 1990. The label was issued in the year 2000. What was going on in those 10 years? All these people were delaying and fighting having an organic label put out there. So it's really us against Goliath, I have to tell you.
I can also say from the outset of the USDA organic certification standards, I was very leery about trusting them at all, because long before the USDA finally settled on certain organic guidelines for certification, there were many independent certification groups like QAI and a number in certain states like California and Oregon and I don't know, maybe Colorado, certain independent organizations that would do their own certification procedures, and they seem to be a lot more trustworthy than the USDA ever was, because the USDA fought tooth and nail in conjunction with the agribusiness industry and the biotech industry to allow things like GMOs and radiation and sewage sludge to be allowed in organic certification, but there were very progressive, level-headed activists against that kind of reactionary approach that the USA wanted to take to benefit their industries that they really exist to protect, as opposed to the taxpayers who are paying their salaries.
That's right.
So
And
to this day, I still don't really trust the USDA as much as I trust the independent group.
the USDA organic label is constantly under attack. Okay, let's move on and get to something positive. Okay, but first, look who is funding the attacks on Prop 37. Need I say more? Just these two alone have put in millions because they stand to lose the most. It's really incredible when you think about it. Okay, who is for Prop 37? Environmental Working Group, Consumer Watchdog, Organic Consumers Association. Does it help for you in the back if I read these? The Non-GMO Project, Institute for Responsible Technology, Pesticide Action Network, Food Democracy Now!, Food and Water Watch, Center for Food Safety, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which I think we're probably all familiar with, California Nurses, American Academy of Environmental Medicine, Rainforest Action Network, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just putting in so you know that the money has been put up by Mercola and Organic Consumers Fund. But there are 2,000 more organizations in support of Prop 37. I checked this out the other day and looked on the list, and I found some Tea Party chapters are in favor of Prop 37. So if that doesn't tell you there's common ground, I don't know what does. So the no on 37, this is what you're going to hear, right? Okay. So Prop 37 bans thousands of common food products. Outright lie. Would cost millions more in bureaucracy. No. Exaggerates estimates from the nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office. Would increase food costs by hundreds of dollars per year. I hate to hear how how that might be really impacting people that do not have a big budget. I mean, you could scare people with this. That was the conclusion of a study paid for by the No on 37 campaign. No independent studies have confirmed these. Okay. Trial lawyers. If you go to the No on 37 website, it says, this is a payday, a giant payday for trial lawyers. Well, if you break the law, it is, right? If we pass this and it's the law, you have to break the law before the trial lawyers get a chance. And even so, it's not inspired or funded by them. There was one woman from Chico who started this in January 2011. And I think it's sensational that there's been such enormous public support. 850 million people signed to put it on the ballot. 850.
No.
Oh, wait. 1,000 Californians signed to get this on the ballot. So in about 3 weeks, you'll be able to vote on this. And we are shocked that somebody is politically motivated. Okay, so what can you do? Obviously, vote yes. Spread the word through your social networks. Put it on your Facebook or whatever. And here's something that Pam Larry, who's the woman who instigated this whole thing, said when I heard her speak a couple weeks ago. Good idea. She said, talk to everybody. When you go to the grocery store and you're checking out, tell the cashier, wear a button. Hey, do you know about Prop 37? Please vote yes. When you pay for your gasoline, when you're sitting on the BART car, everybody, there are a lot of people who don't know about it, and there are a lot of propositions out there. So just get it yes on 37 in their mind. And for more information, CaliforniaRightToKnow.org. For yourself, for the children, for the environment, and for democracy, vote yes on Prop 37. I have some information up here, and there's that motorcycle again. So there's time for a few questions. Yes?
If this passes, how long will retailers have to comply with the law?
It takes effect in 2014.
Oh, okay.
Does it include also foods that have been radiated? I know that was a big issue by itself, but I don't.
Right. I don't think it's mentioned in this, no. Irradiation, it's a whole nother hazard. You know about irradiation, that they can zap foods to give them longer shelf life, mostly meat, which tells me that the slaughterhouses are so filthy, the product is dangerous. That's what irradiation, but that's not in this proposition.
Why did they get so long to comply with it?
What, say again?
Why did they get so long to comply with the law? Why is it 2014 instead of 2013?
I think many laws typically have a lead-up period of about this length of time. So I think that's pretty standard practice.
I think they did that because they said food manufacturers typically update their packaging every year, so this would be no problem for them to add this label by July 14th in 2014. It wouldn't cost them anything extra. They're not going to force any food manufacturer to incur the charge of suddenly changing their packaging.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking of the loose fruits and vegetables you see at the grocery store. I mean, that just seems like sticking that on the sign that it's GMO or not GMO.
Well,
And that seems like
if you can do that now, just buy organic.
yeah.
So organic does not supposed to not have GMO in it. Yes.
I've also found periodically, particularly when I'm shopping in Whole Foods, which, unlike locally owned health food stores, on one hand, the employees tend to be seem to be a lot less health conscious than the people who both work and the people who shop in the locally owned health food stores. and people who shop there, sometimes I get into little conversations with them about how to distinguish the certified organic produce from the non-organic. And Whole Foods got in a lot of trouble the last few weeks regarding how factual their, how reliable their standards against GMO products are. I don't know, I've heard that some of their stuff that's supposedly certified organic is not, can be GMO, but I don't know if that might also apply to the produce section. And also the fact that they sell both certified organic and so-called conventional produce. It's hard to know sometimes which is organic, which is conventional. Sometimes the signs are mixed up, and people who work and actually shop in Whole Foods, when I talk to them about which is which, they often automatically assume that everything sold in Whole Foods in the produce section is organic, despite the fact they sell a whole mixed bunch, and they're selling an increasing variety of conventional and less organic, because they use the excuse if they can't get it throughout the year from certain places, then they'll get it conventional. But other health food stores in the same area can easily get it organic because they have other, I guess, better suppliers or something.
I know. Whole Foods
seems to go out of the way to confuse them.
I know. Whole Foods has lost its halo, but I still think it's incredibly important to get the move started. And they, in fact, have signed on to endorse Prop 37, which, of course, has triggered all their critics to say, but you're still selling it. I'm an incrementalist. I believe little steps, they're trying at least, I hope. And also, it's important to have purists to keep their feet to the fire. So that's good, too. Okay, I think we're getting our little signal here. Yes?
Right now at Whole Foods, they have a mango a brand called Cecil Mango. And the mango is so big, like this. I'm not kidding, you can go right now. And I asked the guy, what kind of mango is this? It's big like a football, bigger than a football. And it's called a Cecil Mango. I said, where is it from? There was no. So he went in the back and he came back and he said, it's from Riverside, Southern California. And I was going to kind of track Riverside City Hall and see, what farms there are that produce this kind of mango. And I went, whoa, this is amazing. I don't believe it.
You were suspicious, right?
Did it have an organic label on it?
Yes.
So it had a 9.
It says organic. Yeah.
Okay, we need to go. I've got some materials up here if you want any. And also, I'm at the speaker's booth. I've got some books if you're interested. So further information. So yes on 37. Thank you.